Welcome back to my channel, guys. My name is Brent, and this is the AutoDeity Garage.
Check the mic and make sure it sound right, boys.
So, you've decided that you want to work on your own car. That's awesome. Not a lot of people want to do it. I know when I started out, I had a 1982 Dodge pickup. It was a piece of crap, it broke down all the time, and the only thing I could do because I had no money was to try to fix it myself. So, in tonight's video, we're going to talk about the basic tools that I think will help you in your mechanical journey. Before we start the video tonight, I'd like to thank the unofficial sponsor of tonight's video, is Joann's Fabric, because without them, I would have an unupholstered stool and I'd have to stand all night. And I mean, let's be honest, who would want that? The tools I'm about to name are what I think should be in everybody's toolbox. Starting out, these tools are going to be your best friend for getting that car up and running again without having to send it to a shop. The tools that I think are going to help you out the most initially are going to be a BFH, a rubber mallet, a set of socket wrenches, a Torx wrench, long and short socket extensions, deep and shallow sockets, open-end wrenches, a long flathead screwdriver, and a wire brush. You're probably wondering what a BFH is. Have you never heard of one before? Well, let's just go with a big hammer. You gotta hold your hand up and it'll come to you. This is a BFH, big blank hammer. This is gonna be one of your best friends. At the end of the day, you're gonna have to hit something on your car. A lot of us do. Sometimes it actually fixes the problem that you didn't know was there. Anyway, you're going to use this to fix dents. You're going to use this as an impact because at the end of the day, not a lot of people have access to an impact gun, air compressor, and a whole host of other tools that you'll get, as you advance down your mechanical journey. The other thing that you definitely want to have is a rubber mallet. These are super cheap. This one came from Lowe's. It weighs about 1.5 pounds, and it works great. It doesn't scratch up everything. You can use this to hit off rotors without worrying about messing the rotor up. Typically, the other hammer will leave dents in certain things, but in general, this is great. Certain things like brake calipers and stuff like that you're not going to want to get to a specific torque specification, this will work fine. The next tool that I think that everybody should have in their arsenal is a 3/8 drive socket wrench and a 1/2 inch drive socket wrench. What's the difference? Well, 3/8 will get you through most of what you need it to do. Small bolts, small nuts, it doesn't really matter. This will work fine. The 1/2 inch comes in handy when you're dealing with lug nuts, axle nuts, a lot of these things that you're going to be working on in your driveway or in a parking lot. You're going to need some extra force, and that's where the 1/2 inch drive comes in handy. But in general, this 3/8 will do just fine for most of the stuff that you're going to do under the hood. Next up is a torque wrench. This is a click style torque wrench. What that means is when it's unlocked, you click it by rotating the handle and it will set to a specified torque. This is in foot-pounds and Newton meters. This is a 1/2 inch drive torque wrench. Typically, a 1/2 inch drive works for most of the stuff that I need it for. I usually only really go ham on specified torques when it comes to larger nuts like axle nuts and stuff like that I'm worried about possibly coming off and leading to a disastrous situation that we don't want. If you're going to buy it, I recommend buying a 1/2 inch drive and a 3/8 inch drive torque wrench. That'll get you the low range for certain things that are specified in torque. The next piece of equipment that I highly recommend you buy are long and short socket adapters. Most of this is going to be available in the kit that you buy if you go and buy a mechanic set that's going to have 1/2 inch and 3/8 inch drive socket wrenches. But it's good to have extra because at the end of the day, that socket wrench is going to be clanging around under your hood. It's going to hit your frame. There's going to be a lot of things that's not going to reach, and that's where you're going to want these thin extensions. This will get you just about everywhere you need to get. Next thing I want to touch on is open-end wrenches. So this is a closed open-end wrench. This is a ratcheting open-end wrench. What's the difference? Well, ratcheting works just like a socket wrench. It ratchets. This will work great in tight spots where you can't get the socket wrench in and your hand can't fit. this will work perfect, and it'll end up, turning the bolt until you get to the point that you need to. The only downside is you don't really want to hit this. You want to hit this. This is the closed end. Both of these wrenches have a 12-point side and a 5-point side. Hit this, not this. When you're working on your brakes and you want to remove your brake caliper or you want to put it back on, you want it to get a little tighter, you're going to put this wrench on and you're going to hit this with a hammer. The thing that can happen with the ratcheting wrench is that you end up ruining it if you hit it too hard. It'll strip out the gears on the inside and it'll render it useless, and you'll be upset and you'll probably toss your car out of the driveway and you'll let it go off a cliff, and then you'll just forget about it and you won't want to ever work on a car again. So by buying these two things, very inexpensive, you can get them anywhere, any auto store, Harbor Freight, whatever. It'll save your whole car. Next up is sockets. You got shallow and deep. Shallow sockets work well for taking off nuts or bolts that don't have a long threaded piece sticking through it. Deep sockets are exactly the opposite. They're excellent for taking off bolts and nuts that have a threaded part sticking through it. The benefit of these is that the bolt won't bottom out in it. And that's what you need, because unfortunately, if you're dealing with a long bolt that has a nut way down on it, like typically it'll be what's holding down like your some of your valve cover bolts, especially on like Hondas. They'll hold your wiring harnesses, and then when you're trying to take that off, this socket will bottom out. That's where the deep socket comes in. Now, the next thing I'm going to say will apply to sockets and the open-end wrenches. Both of these come in metric and standard. So depending on what vehicle you're working on, you're going to want one or the other. I work on Japanese vehicles. Typically, most of what I deal with is metric sockets. That being said, on some of the newer American cars, parts come from all over the world, and you're probably going to need a mix of both. Metric, I would say the range that most people will use on a regular basis will go from about an 8mm up to a 19mm. And as far as standard, you're probably going to go from like a quarter all the way up to like a 15/16. Again, most automotive kits that you're going to buy at Home Depot or AutoZone or wherever you go, they're going to contain all of that stuff. So you don't have to worry about looking and going to different places and finding just odds and ends. That's not a thing anymore. The next tool, which may possibly be one of the best tools that you can ever have in any toolbox, that is the long flathead screwdriver. It might seem silly. This one's about 2 feet long. I highly recommend you get one. You can sword fight with your friend. You can use this thing as a chisel. You can defend off people coming into your garage to steal auto parts. You can use whatever you want. You'll stick this thing down in a cylinder to figure out when it's at top dead center. You will use a flathead screwdriver so much, it will be your best friend. Last tool that I think is going to be useful in your toolbox is a wire brush. I would say to buy a wire brush and a nylon brush. A wire brush can scrape up your dust boots and ball joints and stuff like that and actually cause them to rip and leak grease. You don't want that. That's where the nylon brush is handy. But the wire brush is great if you're trying to remove some rust from stuff. If you just want to hit it with some spray paint, this will work great. Let's talk supplemental tools. These are things that you don't really need, but you'll want them. One of the things that I highly recommend everybody buying, it's about a couple dollars, is a large steel pipe. What do you do with this? Well, I'll tell you. You hold the pipe, you grab that socket wrench because you couldn't get it to turn with all your force, and you drop it into that pipe. Now, you've got a 3-foot socket wrench. This will be great. You'll get more torque out of anything you need to with this socket wrench. Highly recommend it. Get this pipe. It cost me $5 at Home Depot. The next supplemental tool that I think you should definitely get in your toolbox is going to be a pump jack. If you're working in your driveway or something like that and all you have is the little jack underneath your car, you might do like 1 or 2 repairs with that, but that's going to drive you nuts and you're not going to want to work under that. So you're going to need to get a good pump jack. You can go to Harbor Freight, get a cheap one, go to any auto store. Everybody sells them. Just look at reviews, make sure that you're getting one that's well reviewed and actually has a decent pumping speed, because you don't want to be sitting there pumping all day. The next thing after that is to get a really good set of jack stands. Again, I don't recommend buying them from Harbor Freight. There was a big issue recently with the jack stands actually breaking at the weld and causing cars to fall on people. You're going to be working under this car. You want to protect your life, don't you? So anyway, I would recommend getting a decent set of jack stands. Look online, find reviews. If you find some good stuff in your local area, go buy it. Again, I like older stuff because this metal was different. It was a lot stronger. Typically why I would buy like an old Vice or something like that. But again, that's another episode. If you enjoyed this video and like what you saw, leave a comment below, like and subscribe. And as always, be safe.